Welcome to the News Hour. It's just after 1500 hours GMT, and we start in the U.S. That's where the battle for control of Congress has been tighter than predicted. And that's despite indications from opinion polls. So many had speculated there would be a so-called red wave of big gains for the Republican Party. So far, that doesn't appear to be the case. Now, the party is in the lead for seats in the House of Representatives, but by a smaller margin than forecast. So control of the Senate sits on a knife edge. Both parties have now secured 48 seats. The battleground states of Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, and Georgia are being watched very closely. So far, only one Senate seat has flipped. That's Democrat John Fetterman defeated Trump-backed TV celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz in the crucial state of Pennsylvania. Rosalind Jordan wraps up the results so far.
God bless you guys.
It was billed as the red wave of 2022. Republicans winning control of Congress to become President Joe Biden's biggest political obstacle. But Democrats have won several important races. Mark Kelly of Arizona was reelected to the Senate. He'll be joined by Pennsylvania's John Fetterman, who overcame both a stroke and stiff competition from the celebrity doctor Mehmet Oz.
I'm proud of what we ran on. Healthcare is a fundamental human right. It saved my life, and it should all be there for you.
The midterms came after months of Republicans accusing Democrats of plotting to steal the vote. Despite fears of potential disruptions at polling stations, nothing significant was reported. The president spent Tuesday evening congratulating Democrats who won their races, and he urged people still waiting to vote in western states to stay in line. Democrats' hopes died early, though, in Florida, where Republicans now control all of the top seats.
We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die. While our country flounders due to failed leadership in Washington, Florida is on the right track.
Former President Donald Trump promised he would take credit for any Republican victories, and he did just that.
I wonder what Biden would do right now, but
One of the candidates Trump endorsed did not thank him during his victory speech.
Now the people of Ohio have given us a job. And what we need to do over the next couple of years, over the next 6 years, for the full length of this Senate term, whoever's in the majority, whatever the president looks like, we have a very simple job to do. It's to go to work every single day and fight for the people of Ohio.
let's get America back on track.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has long dreamed of taking the Speaker's gavel from Nancy Pelosi, but voters may not be ready for that. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera.
We have Shihab Ratansi joining us from Capitol Hill in a moment. But first, let's go to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, who's joining us from Washington, D.C. So, Kimberly, as of this hour, uncertainty over who will control Congress. When do we get more results?
Well, what we're waiting for is for these votes to be counted, and it could still take a number of days or even weeks. That we know that as far west as California, they are still counting. So this could take some time. But what we do know already, as you've mentioned at the top of the show, is that this is not the red wave that many were expecting. In other words, a conservative, strong majority of Republicans taking control of the House. But instead, this is more of a ripple. What this is going to look like moving forward, then, is meaning that many of the agenda items that Republicans had on their mind are not going to materialize in terms of legislation like tough on crime or trying to investigate the Biden administration or even undo some of the legislation from the past 2 years. What we've seen is a lot of the Democratic candidates retaining their seats and a rejection of some of the candidates, Republican candidates, who were backed by former President Donald Trump. And the takeaway message that we can get from that is that when it comes to the former President Donald Trump's chances of running in 2024, there seems to be a strong message of the American people maybe rejecting that and really dashing the president's chances of running again.
Right. And what is the mood like at the White House as these results come in?
Well, for the current president, Joe Biden, there seems to be some cautious optimism. What the takeaway is that this is not a rejection of the Biden agenda. You have to remember, the president went into these midterm elections deeply unpopular. 54% of Americans disapprove of Joe Biden's performance right now, but not of what he is doing or trying to accomplish. And that's a very important nuance. In other words, they like that he's trying to fix bridges. They like that he's trying to revive the economy. And they like that he is trying to codify a woman's right to choose or protect abortion rights. So in other words, the White House sees this as a bit of a victory and that there is a reason to be optimistic and move forward. And so that is what we expect we will hear from the president today. There has been no official update to his schedule just yet, but we are expecting an update in any time. What this will look like, we're not sure if it will be a press conference, if it will be a speech, but we are expecting to hear from the president. We are expecting to hear that he believes he has a strong mandate to move forward and that he's likely to run again in 2024.
All right, Kimberly, we'll speak to you later. Thank you so much. Kimberly Halkett reporting from the White House. So all eyes are now on those races yet to be decided. Georgia Senate race is too close to call. It's been described as a must-win race by Republicans. That's if they want to gain control. But it now looks like it might be heading for a runoff. Then there's the Arizona Senate race. It seems to be good news for the Democrats. The incumbent Mark Kelly is leading his Republican rival Blake Masters, who believes the last election was stolen. Nevada conducts a predominantly mail ballot system, which could take days to count. But latest results show the Democratic candidate trailing behind her Republican rival. Mail-in ballots have historically favored Democrats. There's the Wisconsin Senate race, which is also very tight. But it's likely that Republican Ron Johnson will hold his seat against the Democratic rising star Mandela Barnes. Let's now bring in Shihab Bertansi. He's joining us from Capitol Hill. So when it comes to Georgia, Shihab, what should we be looking out for?
Well, the votes are still being counted. It's just not clear as to how many are left and whether they will be sufficient to push either the Republican or the Democrat over 50%. 50% plus one is needed by a candidate to claim victory in order to avoid a runoff. And I think what's being looked at now is the data. If, as in so many other races around the country, it becomes clear that abortion, once again, was the major issue that got that Democratic base out. Even that base who is a bit disillusioned with Joe Biden has got the independent voters out who were alarmed at the curtailment of a woman's right to choose. Is that going to be sustainable into a runoff if it does make it to a runoff in early December? The interesting thing is, though, and, even if there is a runoff, as you suggest, this could all be over anyway with the vote counts in Arizona or Nevada. But if there's a runoff and the balance of power in the Senate depends on the runoff in Georgia, an interesting factor comes into play here, because what we saw was a lot of Republicans, it seems, splitting their vote between the Republican governor in Georgia, who won very easily, but it would appear a couple of 100,000 voters felt that they could vote for the Republican governor, but just couldn't vote for Herschel Walker, the Republican Senate candidate. And there could be many reasons for that. He has has a very staunch anti-abortion stance. However, he's also been dogged by allegations of hypocrisy, allegations that he himself has paid for abortions in the past. But if the balance of power in the Senate is at stake on this vote in December, then will those Republicans who felt they couldn't vote for Herschel Walker this time, also because of his character, because of his grasp of the issues, because of his closeness to Donald Trump or whatever, will they feel, actually, look, we will vote for him because we want to prevent the Senate from remaining in Democratic hands? Right,
and so far as Arizona goes, what have been the biggest issues that have played out at the ballot box?
Now, in Arizona, it wasn't such a surprise that abortion was a very big issue, because voters had been saying to the pollsters, yeah, abortion remains an issue. That hasn't, a lot of pollsters around the country thought, or at least told us, that they'd been told that the economy had eclipsed abortion as a major issue amongst swing voters and the base. But in Arizona, actually, it was pretty constant because of the extreme position of the Republican candidate in Arizona. It was so extreme, in fact, that he actually had to alter his website at one point because it was seen as being such a liability amongst suburban voters, swing voters, and so on. So that wasn't such a surprise. So abortion a big issue, but then this will also be, it would appear, another test of a Trump-endorsed, extreme MAGA, Make America Great Again, someone who's equivocated, who's, again, tried to soften his position, but in the past has said he thought that Joe Biden had stolen the election. It'll be another test of another candidate who is seen as a very pro-Trump, extreme Make America Great Again candidate.
Okay, Shihab, thank you so much. Shihab Bertansi reporting for us from Capitol Hill. Let's now bring in Laura Brown, who's a political scientist and author of the book Amateur Hour, Presidential Character and the Question of Leadership. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. Welcome to Al Jazeera. Just to pick up on a point that our correspondent Shihab Bertansi was making, he was saying that in states like Georgia and Arizona, the issue of abortion featured large. Are you surprised by that?
Well, I'm not surprised because in some ways what we're talking about is that the Supreme Court created a historic change this last summer by removing the right to an abortion. And that had been law since the 1970s. So you are talking about many women who were facing the idea of rolling back their freedoms. And I think it's also important to say that this is where I think the pollsters were wrong. The demographic that may have actually swung this election in the Democrats' favor in those couple crucial Senate races would have been young voters, those under 25, those who were also not in the likely voter model screen, meaning that when pollsters would ask people, are you likely to vote? And they would then base those decisions on whether or not they had voted in the past, many young voters would not get included in those models. And that's probably why some of the polling misses appear to have occurred.
So what do you make of the results in general, or what we know so far? Because with the exception of Florida, where Republicans did really well, are you surprised that we're not seeing this red wave that was predicted?
Well, certainly by historic standards, this is really an incredible night for the Democrats. You know, there has not been a majority party in the White House and in the Congress that has done so well in a midterm. So even if the Democrats lose the House, and they appear to be on track to do that, Speaker Kevin McCarthy's majority would be very narrow, and that would be a win for the Democrats. You know, the average number of seat losses is in the mid-20s.
But here's the thing, even a small majority in the House for the Republicans could still threaten to block the next 2 years of Biden's presidency and that agenda going forward, could they not?
Well, certainly. But of course, if the Senate is and remains Democratic, then it's also true that a narrow majority in the House, where there are fights between the different kinds of Republicans who are chairing up the committees in the House, could in fact make the House look more obstructionist and more extremist, and could in fact turn off more of American voters than turn them on in advance of the 2024 election.
And this, of course, is the first midterm election since the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Is there a sort of an overriding message that stands out for you that voters have been sending out?
Yeah, I think what it is that Americans are really not enthusiastic about extremists of either party. I think it is true that you saw more progressive candidates on the Democratic side, like Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke, also falling to Republicans. And you saw Republicans who were extremists, like Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, falling to moderates like Josh Shapiro. So really what the country is saying is, please, American political parties, find your center again and get going with compromise and the work that needs to be done to fix the economy and the increase in crime.
All right, Laura Brown, thank you so much for speaking to us from Washington, D.C.
Thank you.